Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christianson. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Hey, Dr. C here with you. You know, when your hormones aren't right, you don't feel your best, and that can manifest in a lot of problems. One that we don't always talk about as much is female sexual dysfunction. But this is a big one. We have got good data saying that even in healthy populations, 30 to 40% of female adults can have problems with their love life. And this is a large factor creating just a poor quality of life. Stressors, anxieties, concerns, worries, relationship struggles, they can all stem from that. And this is something that people should be okay talking about with their medical team and finding solutions for. So I'm really excited to have a friend here to talk about this with you all. And today I'll be talking with Susan Bratton. She's the intimacy expert to millions. She's a champion and advocate for all those who desire more intimacy and more passion throughout their whole lifespan. She and I talk about the problem of female sexual dysfunction and how many health factors can drive that. And we'll cover some real good solutions and talk about ways in which you can regain your healthy function and have good intimacy back again. So please enjoy today's episode with Susan Bratton. Hey, Dr. C here with you, and welcome back to another episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. This is a lot of fun. This is a dear friend. She and I were just hanging out recently, so we got to talk about some of these things. But yeah, Susan, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you again.
Hello, Dr. C. It's so nice to see you more than one time every year. It's my lucky year.
Well, my lucky year. So let's dive on in. This is a big topic. I've not really gone into much at all with my audience, but it's a huge part of hormonal health, of thyroid function, of quality of life. So let's give us a good overview. What is this whole thing of sexual dysfunction? How would we define this?
Well, I'd like to say that I don't even think sexual dysfunction should be a thing.
Okay.
I don't like the words. It's like turning things that are fixable into what sound like diseases to me. It almost seems like a pharmaceutical lens or something like that for me. Like if we call it a dysfunction, then it's a problem we can solve with a pill. And what usually happens, and there's sexual dysfunction, if you will. There are problems that happen with our bodies that stem from a couple of different things. And maybe what I should talk about, what are the typical dysfunctions, if you will? What goes wrong with us? Let's take the female body first. Often as women age, we experience atrophy. So just like we're wrinkling on the outside, darn it, we're wrinkling on the inside, if you will. We're desiccating, we're drying up, we're shrinking. And when we shrink, all the parts shrink, including our genitals. And our genitals are a system. It's the urogenital system, and it's intertwined. And there's your bladder and urethra, and there's the pelvic musculature that holds that. There's the vaginal canal and the cervix and the uterus and all its associated parts. And then there's the clitoral structure. But there are actually 3 erectile tissue systems that are in what I often use as a word called the vulva, because a lot of people think about their genital system as the vagina, but the vagina is just the birth canal.
Right.
And for female pleasure, there's so much more than the vagina, though the vagina can create a lot of pleasure. There's so much more. And that's why I like to talk about the clitoris as being a clitoral system. And then I like to expand people's thinking beyond just the clitoral system, which I'd like to describe. I'd like as 2 other erectile tissue systems in our vulva. There's also a urethral system and a perineal system, and they all have erectile tissue in them. And one of the myths, and I love that your show is so much about myth busting. One of the myths is that men were very aware of their erectile function or dysfunction or loss of function because it's obvious. He has an outie and we as women have an innie. And so we can see when things aren't working down there for him. But we have the same amount of erectile tissue in our female system as our male-bodied partners do in their male system. And the things that are happening to him are happening to us. He is having atherosclerosis or, a loss of ability to send blood everywhere it needs to go in his body. He's having calcification of his vascular system. He's having loss of blood flow generally, lower nitric oxide production as he ages. And we have the same exact problems, but no one is championing the female erectile system. And that's why I really appreciate you allowing me to come on today and talk about that, because for both sexes, we end up over time losing our ability to get blood flow to those systems, which creates problems for us. And for the female body, one of the things it really creates is a loss of lubrication. A lot of women think that it's hormones that are responsible for the lubrication of their vagina. But in actual fact, estrogen does keep our skin, including our vaginal mucosal lining, thicker and more robust and more resilient. And as we lose estrogen as we age, our tissue does thin, all of our tissue, the tissue on our arms, the tissue in our vagina, the tissue in our vulva, the outer skin, it all thins, and it can lead to painful sex. But that's not the loss of lubrication. The loss of lubrication is actually the decline of nitric oxide production that gets the blood into the pelvic bowl during arousal. And I want a parking lot arousal too, Alan, because I think about libido, desire, and arousal as three separate but interconnected processes that we need to enjoy pleasure. And when we're not getting all of those systems activated, our pleasure goes down, which dips our desire, which drops our libido, which is what often women who are going through menopause think is the problem, is menopause, and it's not at all. And so I want to unwind that myth too. So let's parking lot that.
Libido, desire, and arousal. So yeah,
yes.
To me, they would have been interchangeable. So I'm eager to learn about
I know.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like three words that mean the same thing, but they're very different. And when you begin to describe them to people, they're like, oh, right, they are different parts of how I approach my sexual desire. So going back to the blood flow, the vagina itself is an amazing muscle. Babies come out of there. It's this incredible stretchy system of just absolute joy and pleasure for many of us, and can be for all of us. But it's not a gland. It's not self-lubricating. The lubrication comes from our blood plasma recruited to our pelvic bowl upon arousal that seeps through the vaginal mucosal lining and wets our vagina. And though how much you want your partner isn't directly correlated to how lubricated you are, when you're not lubricated, you don't feel as turned on. So it's a funny disconnected system that's still in our minds. If we're dry, not only does that create painful sex, but it also makes us feel like maybe we don't have the sex drive we used to. And so getting that lubrication going again is super important. And one of the ways to do that, the simplest way, I always have this thing, Ellen, where I like to talk about things that are like the down and dirty, cheap, super basic things that are going to get you way down the road. And then once you're way down the road with the super easy, cheap, and dirty things, there's always the whipped cream on the sundae. There's always the cherry on top.
Sure.
And those can be kind of the more, pricey or luxury or super luxury types of things. And I do want to briefly talk about that. So I'd love to parking lot that too, because I don't want to just talk about the problems. I want to talk about the solutions, because ultimately, once you understand what your problems are, you'll know the right solutions to approach. And that's really my message today, is that us women, especially, we end up taking care of ourselves and our male-bodied partners. And I want your listeners to know that there are a lot of things that you can do to get that juicy, vibrant, horniness, that lust, that zest, that desire going again. So the first thing that you have to know is that you have all this erectile tissue in your vulva, and it's important to nurture it and care for it and feed it with nutrients, because ultimately it is what brings the most pleasure. You need to have blood flow to get something called engorgement, which is essentially an internal erection. If we have as much erectile tissue as our male-bodied partners, and we don't get our internal vulval erection through this blood flow and feeling good about ourselves and our partner, then we have we're making love with what you would look at a male-bodied partner and say would be a flaccid penis. We have a flaccid vulva. And when you have a flaccid erectile system, it's shrunk. It's small, it's tiny. And then when it fills with blood, all the tissue expands. And when the tissue expands and brings all that blood flow, it's actually larger. And when it's larger and it's stimulated and pleasured, it sends way more signals of pleasure to the brain, which is your number one sex organ. So many women over time, as they age, feel, and so do our male-bodied partners, feel like they are having trouble achieving satisfaction from lovemaking. They can't quite get there, or if they do, it takes so long, they get impatient with themselves. And so then they're less interested in instigating and initiating or even accepting offers for lovemaking. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to expand on one point. So many. So any numbers you have top of mind about just prevalence, like how common this is? My thought is that I'd like the listeners to have a sense, if they're struggling with this, how typical is that? Are they unusual? I mean, yeah, how prevalent does this become as we age?
I would say probably it's one of those 80-20 things. There are some women and male-bodied partners who are lucky to sail through their lives with no erectile dysfunction, plenty of lubrication, lots of sensation, and they don't have to try hard at all. And they're having great sex into their 80s and even their 90s if they live that long. And there are people out there like that. But for the rest of us, it's just like good diet, our good nutrition. I don't even like to use the word diet. I just like the word nutrition, feeding our bodies well, right? So feeding ourselves leafy green vegetables, beetroot, the things that turn our food into this gaseous signaling molecule that triggers the blood flow to our pelvis when we're making love, to our brain when we're thinking, to our heart or our glutes when we're working out, to our pelvic bowl when we're making love. So I'd say it's an 80-20 thing where most of us have to do some maintenance. We're not born so lucky that it just never dissipates on us. And the interesting thing about it too, Alan, is that it dissipates so slowly over time that one day you realize you've lost so much functionality. If I could magically turn a switch and give you back the functionality, the full function that you had at 25, 35 years old, you'd think to yourself, oh my goodness, I had no idea how much sensation and pleasure I had lost. And that actually happened to me. And that's why I know that this is true. When I was 55 years old, I began this journey of what I call sexual biohacking, and I really look at this as there's two categories of reversing the ravages of aging in our genital systems. There's category one, which is the reversing the aging, which I would call regenerative treatments. And then there's the other piece, which is, no, I'm fine and I want to make sure I keep it that way. And that's more like the biohacking piece, the optimization piece. I'm not going to let it decline. So it just depends on where you are when you hear this information and what you want to do with it. But I started on a vaginal restoration program, if you will. I started trying all the different things that were available to me. Here's what happens to women: loss of lubrication, atrophy of the vulva and the clitoral erectile tissue systems, incontinence, and just general, because of all of that kind of going south, less interest in sex because it doesn't feel as good as it used to. So I started on the regenerative practices, and I remember that I did a few intravaginal procedures, and they helped restore some of my vaginal mucosal lining, but they were so damaging that I just really wasn't happy recommending them. And then a new product came out called the V-Fit. And it's an at-home do-it-yourself vaginal restoration device. And it uses three technologies, 3 modes. It uses photobiomodulation, which is red light therapy, which is really good at stimulating new mitochondrial growth and regenerating tissue. It uses warmth, which helps recollagenate that vaginal mucosa. And it uses vibration, which helps with the Kegel toning. So that's what I recommend now. And if you go to, can I say a URL? Because women are going to be like, what was that thing and where do I get it?
Sure, yeah.
It's at vaginadevice.com. And check that out.
We'll get this in the notes too.
Yeah, thank you. I use it frequently because you're always aging. And so you want to reverse the aging as you go. You want to get yourself back, and then you want to keep it at bay as you age. And I also had PRP shots. They're called O shots in my clitoral structures to essentially rejuvenate that erectile tissue. And PRP is platelet-rich plasma. It's derived from our own blood. They take a small vial of blood out of your arm, put it in a centrifuge, spin it, take the white and red blood cells out of it. You're left with something called a fibrin-rich matrix of growth factors from your own body, cytokines that call your own stem cells to come back in and repair. And it's injected with numbing cream. It never hurt me once. And I've had 7 of them now, Alan. And it reconstitutes that clitoral structure. So you return your sensation and that erectile function again. And the first one I thought, oh, I don't know. I'm not really sure if this O-shot thing is a thing. And my girlfriend and a friend of yours as well, Dr. Robin Benson, said, you know, honey, you might need more than one. It's not magic. You are 55. At this time I was 56. And I was like, okay, let's do another one. The second one was the trick for me. On the second one, and this was like, maybe I'm going to say, because PRP isn't like instant. It takes about 90 days to achieve full effect of the reversal, because it's growing new tissue. It's revascularizing. It's improving nerve function. There's neurogenesis happening. It's stimulating new growth of that structure. And about a month or 2 later, I thought, oh my goodness, it worked. And this is what it felt like when I would make love in my 30s. And I was 56 at the time. And I thought, wow, I went from 56 to 35 or 36, whatever it was. I dialed back 20 years of aging with 2 simple little injections to my clitoral structure, starting to take my nitric oxide supplement. And I had those couple of procedures, which helped a lot, though now I only recommend the at-home products unless that doesn't work. If the V-Fit doesn't work for you after you do the 18 weeks or 20 weeks of it, you know, every other day or so, as consistently as you can, then you can go for the big guns and use the lasers and the CO2s and go into the doctor for treatment. You know, you may need more, but I always say, try the easy small thing that doesn't hurt first. And that was what restored my function. And now I've just gone on to continue to maintain it. And at 61, I'm having the best sex of my life, and it feels better than ever, because one of the great things about your sexuality is that as you age and mature, you become a better lover. You become more confident. You have more experience. You have more skills. You're more open to trying things if your sexuality is important to you. And so you can be an old person with a young vulva with the miracles of simple treatments today. And, you know, I don't sell any of these things. I'm just here to be I just really like to hold the possibility for people to not give up on their intimate life if it hurts or it's dry or it's painful or they've got incontinence or their husband's not getting an erection, because I want to talk about that as well. And there's one last thing that I have started doing now that is like, boom, so helpful. And it's something called FemiWave, FEMIWAVE, FemiWave. And it's applied outside the body. It doesn't go inside your vagina like those things that burn the vagina. It doesn't burn, it doesn't hurt, and it stimulates new tissue growth all over your vagina, the bladder, the urethral area, the labia. Because the other thing that happens, horror of horrors, Alan, is that our labia begin to lose their tissue, and they get a little saggy and they don't look as pretty as they used to. And FemiWave is both an aesthetic reversal. It makes it plump and pretty again, but it also stimulates even more tissue growth than you can get with an O shot. O shot just goes right into the clitoral tissue and into the G spot, which is really the urethral tissue. But the FemiWave is even more all around the whole vulval and bladder and urethral area, and it really rejuvenates beautifully. And it's it's the sister to Gainswave, which is what's done to the penis, which is something that now is kind of the leading go-to restorative treatment for reversing erectile dysfunction in men who don't want to have to take Viagra or a PDE5 inhibitor. They want to return to their own firmness. They take nitric oxide booster, they get the Gainswave, they can get a P shot, which is the same as the O shot, but in the penis. And that stack, if you will, it, along with using a vacuum erection device during the procedure and even after to bring more blood carrying capacity to the tissue, is what reverses the atrophy in men so that they can go on to have a nice firm erection and have good intimacy their whole life. So these things go wrong and you can fix them. And for so many people, they don't realize that a lot of the reason that they don't want to have sex, that they've kind of lost their mojo, is because the system's simply not working as well as it used to. And if you restore that, that is also something that really gives you a way to have that loving connection your whole life. There's no reason to lose that now in today's modern times.
That's great. And I think about just the importance of our social connections, and our sense of bonding, and how many ways in which that can affect other facets of one's well-being. So yeah, can you expand upon that a bit just how a healthy sexuality, or if that's a barrier, how that can just affect so many other facets of one's enjoyment of life?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's very interesting. One time I sent out an email I have a sex tips email newsletter, and I have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of readers, and I talk about all these kinds of things all the time. And I sent out an email and I said, tell me if you're not currently intimate with your partner, tell me why. And don't write to me if it's, I don't have a partner, because that's not what this is about. This is about if you no longer have intimacy with your partner and you miss that intimacy, tell me what happened. And this is where we get into those three interlocking circles of libido, desire, and arousal. Libido is your health. And if you are not healthy, you don't have a libido. So people who have cancer, chronic pain, heart disease, diabetes, anything, they've been in an accident, they've had COVID, they're long haulers, they've got chronic fatigue, any autoimmune diseases, anything, that your libido is the other side of the same coin of your overall health. And it's interesting, I can always tell when I'm feeling well and when I'm feeling a little down. And when I'm feeling a little down, because I had long haul, as you know, Alan, I had long haul quite badly. I just go rest, because then I can tell when I'm feeling better, because my libido comes back. And desire is how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your partner. And about 20% of the people who wrote to me and told me what the problem was said, my partner betrayed me and I can't get over it. So it was an emotional issue. And that was what was keeping them from being intimate with their partner. So there were a lot of people who were just unhealthy for various reasons, who had no desire for their partner. Then there were people who were angry, or there were people who didn't feel desirable anymore. They didn't feel like they could be desired. So that's more body image issues or self-worth. That's an emotional game as well. So I think about libido as your body and desire as the emotional aspect of your sexuality. And then Arousal is the other thing that goes wrong with people. And what I found, I want to return to arousal because women and men have very different arousal patterns. And men have some competitive advantages to arousal that women don't have. And for most of our lives, we women have been being intimate with our male-bodied partners in a way that is kind of on their schedule. You know, there's the golden rule and the platinum rule. The golden rule is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And that's a beautiful rule, but not in the bedroom. In the bedroom, you want to play the platinum rule, which is treat your partner the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. But our partners, if they were male-bodied and testosterone dominant, they didn't know any better. They were doing the best they could do. I never say men are wrong. I just say they're not informed. And that's why being here is such a nice opportunity to inform people that women have a different arousal pattern. And when we're rushed for sex, because men, number one, they have more testosterone than we do, which is the molecule of horniness. They wake up, if they're healthy, they wake up every day with a morning erection. They have nighttime erections. Men masturbate. They're driven to masturbate biologically, and it's perfectly normal because they need to keep their sperm topped up. They need it to be fresh. We're here to replicate. You know, that's why we're here. We're driven by that for so many ways. And so they're more actively engaged in their sexuality than women who are on a 28-day cycle with the moon, even after menopause. And so it's top of mind for them. And they have fast-acting hemodynamics. They get a penile erection much more quickly than we get a clitoral or vulval erection. We have a lot of nooks and crannies. Our erectile tissue systems are actually wrapped around our vaginal canal. It's like a golden bracelet, but it has a lot of little parts to it. And it just takes us longer to get the blood into our tissue. So if we've had, and this is another piece of the puzzle here for arousal, when I say the word having sex, most people think that is intercourse. And then they think, okay, well, there's foreplay and there's intercourse. And those are the two things. And for a man, the number one act is intercourse for him because it feels so good for him, where women struggle to have an orgasm from intercourse because they've had sex, by that I mean intercourse, way too fast their whole lives. He's been ready to go, and she kind of goes at his schedule, and then she's rushed, and it's not as pleasurable for her. She has trouble crossing the gasm chasm, the orgasm gap, the gap between how easy it is for him and how hard it is for her to orgasm from intercourse without proper arousal strategies, which is more foreplay. Foreplay is what's designed for our bodies, our female bodies, to become aroused. But men don't spend enough time giving us that foreplay. And so we never achieve our orgasmic potential. Then we think, oh, I guess I'm just not the kind of woman who can orgasm from intercourse. And then he goes, well, I guess you're not. And then you say, well, but that's okay. I still have a good time. I like to be close to him. But you never really get satisfied. And even if you rationalize it in your mind, your body knows you're not satisfied. And so over the years, that just chips away. That loss of enough arousal chips away at your desire. Couple that with the fact that as you age and atrophy, you're losing all of the systems that really make it feel good. And pretty soon you hit midlife and you're like, I could take it or leave it. So you can see how this all happens. So when I wrote to my fans and said, tell me what happens, what I realized was that when people stop having intercourse, they stop doing anything. They stop holding each other. They stop kissing. They start moving into other bedrooms. It's like if you can't do, quote unquote, the main act, you might as well not do anything because you don't want to start something you can't finish, quote unquote. And so what happens is they become estranged. They become platonic. They lose that, I mean, you and Karen have it so beautifully. You have that wonderful connection with each other. You hold hands, you look good for each other, you're loving, you have tenderness. It's so apparent being with you that you have a beautiful, intimate life. That a satisfying, intimate life. You can just see it in all of your interactions, and you can see it when people don't. And they start to recede into themselves. Their oxytocin levels lower. They're not bonded to each other anymore. They don't have the benefits of all of those great hormone releases of pleasure. They don't have the vascular, experience of having this rush of blood flow. It's like they just become diminished. They recede into themselves. They get disconnected. And though the Harvard longitudinal study says that relationship is one of the things, the number one leading thing that keeps us healthy longer and a better lifespan, having an intimate relationship, no one's done this study, but having an intimate relationship does even more for you. So that's why it's so important to understand that there's nothing wrong with you. You didn't know what you didn't know. You can reverse it. You can have a renaissance in your relationship. And even if intercourse is off the table, there are so many other things that you can do, including holding each other, sensual massage, kissing each other. I mean, just being in each other's arms and being close together, it gets you a long way toward all the benefits of intimacy.
This has been great. I wrote in one of my prior books about the relevance of the chronic stress response, and that just being a bigger predictor of death than smoking status or anything. And the counter to that really is intimacy and connection and bonding. And yes, this is wonderful.
I should say that when I wrote that email to everyone and they responded to me, I had a couple of restless nights because, like you, I'm a healer and I want people to have what I'm having, incredible connection and pleasure with my partner. And I really stand for all people having that in whatever capacity is available to them. And I thought, well, I can't personally reply to 500 or 600 people's emails, and they poured their hearts out to me. And I thought, okay, I saw the emails come in and I was like, oh, that's solvable, that's solvable, that's solvable, that's solvable, that's solvable. And then I thought, okay, how am I going to teach them to fish instead of give them the fish? I can't give out 500 fishes. I don't have time in the day for that. How can I teach them to fish? How can I do this? And what I came up with was a technique called the Magic Pill Method. It's at magicpillmethod.com. It's a free download. And it's a technique that has 3 stages of rekindling your relationship, your intimate relationship. And what happens is that people just stop talking about it because they don't even know how to approach it. It's a scary conversation full of self-doubt and shame and blame and all kinds of things. And so I essentially give partners a communication structure that works really well because especially men are afraid to talk about this with their women because women can talk circles around men and they don't feel like they can have conversations where they're going to win. So they don't even bring it up. And so I level the playing field so it's fair for both people. Everybody gets their say. And what you actually do is I give you the structures for how to approach it, how to have the conversation, and then how to make a list of the things you can still do that you still would like to do so that you go from having nothing to reconnecting again where you can and rediscovering each other. And then the third step is the remediation of the problem, because so many people think that what they have isn't fixable. Oh, that's just how it is. I'm just getting old. Oh, I guess this is just what we have to deal with. And that's not true. As we talked about earlier, there are so many things. I mean, what if taking nitric oxide supplements literally fixed your husband's erectile dysfunction issue or fixed your lubrication issue? What if that was all that was missing? You got to start there. You got to try these things. So that magic pill method, I've been on television with that technique. It is something that thousands and thousands and thousands of people have done to great benefit. They've gotten connected again. And so I don't want people to think that their intimacy is over. because there's so much there for us. And it doesn't have to be everything. Even some is wonderful.
So magic pill method, easy step for someone to take.
Yeah.
And maybe this answer is already there on the site, but I'm just imagining someone listening who thinks that I would like to improve my intimacy, but I don't know how to open up that conversation with my partner.
Yep, that's what's in that book.
Okay.
That's what I exactly tell you how to do, because it's scary.
Right.
Yeah, how to do it and make it fair for both parties. Because a lot of times people will stonewall, they'll gaslight, they'll shut down, they'll get angry, they'll play the blame game or the shame game. So how to prevent all those things from happening and make it actually really easy to talk about it with your partner. I take the scary pieces away by giving you the structure.
This is cool. Susan, thank you so much for your time. It can be a difficult topic, but you make it very just non-stressful and joyful, and it's great. It's really, really good.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, it happens to everybody, almost, right? 80-20. So you're not alone and your issues are solvable. And I hope that I've given some of your listeners some hope that they can get the loving attention and affection that they crave without any worry that it has to be perfect.
This is great. So everyone listening, please know that we'll get the links out there for you all about vagina device, magic pill method, about FemiWave. We'll get clearer data, and also about BiFlow Now. You didn't talk about that, but you briefly talked about the idea of nitric oxide pills. Can you mention that one real quick?
Yes. So I looked around at nitric oxide supplements, and one of the things that I noticed was I'm an organic vegetable girl, and most nitric oxide is made from large-scale GMO modified monoculture products, or made from corn byproducts in big lab vats in China. And I talked to a food chemical expert, and I said, if there are pesticides on the food that's put into the nutrient, will the pesticides go away, or do they go into the supplement? And he said, oh, they're right in the supplement. The pesticides are right in there. The GMO stuff's all in there. And so I wanted to make an organic nitric oxide booster. I wanted something that came from organic fruit and vegetables. And all the studies show that for people over 40, your nitric oxide is, by the time you're 50, it's half what it was when you were 20. Your enos system, your vascular system makes part of it, and your salivary system makes the other part of it. And it's your salivary system that still continues to work very well as you age. And I wanted to make something that was out of organic fruits and vegetables. So this is citrulline based rather than arginine based. The citrulline converts to arginine in your body through the salivary system, and it's more highly bioavailable. And believe it or not, I create it from fermented watermelon rinds. That's where all the citrulline is, in organic fermented watermelon rinds. And then it has spinach powder, and it has some polyphenols from a pine bark, some tannin polyphenols that work really well for vascular blood flow as well. And so at BiFlow Now, BuyFlowNow, BuyFlowNow.com, that's my special link when I come on podcasts, so that listeners can get it at the lowest price with best shipping, et cetera, et cetera. Not my main website or Amazon, but BuyFlowNow.com. And that's what Flow is. And so many people can go down to, like a guy can go from a 60 milligram dose of Viagra down to 10 milligrams when he gets his nitric oxide back up again, and even get off of it and not have to take a pharmaceutical. Women get their lubrication and sensation back because they're getting the blood flow to their pelvis that's been missing. So it really is kind of that foundation piece that gets you started.
That's great. Well, again, thank you for your time, Susan. Hope to catch you again sometime soon in the near future. And in the meantime, take great care.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. C with you, everyone. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. Bye-bye. Hey, Dr. Christianson here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christianson on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag Medical Myths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.